Welcome to Creepshow, where we delve into the darkest corners of human nature. Brace yourselves for tonight's bone-chilling episode as we explore 10 macabre murder tales from Asia that will make your skin crawl. These are not your typical stories of crime and horror, but accounts so twisted and horrific that they seem almost beyond belief. Stay tuned if you dare. It is not uncommon to hear accounts of heinous murders in many parts of the world. Unfortunately, Asia is not immune to instances of this nature. On the other hand, the continent has been the source of a multitude of murder stories that have appeared to have occurred solely for the purpose of making us feel sick. For the time being, let's put the well-known instances, we're looking at you, Otaku Murderer, to the side and delve into some of the lesser-known Asian murder stories that will leave you wondering how our fellow human beings could be so nasty. Number 10. Murders in Suwon. A terrible incident occurred in the city of Suwon, which is located in South Korea on April 1, 2012. A Chinese-Korean immigrant worker named Woo Yuan-chun was the culprit of the crime, which involved the kidnapping and murder of a woman who was 28 years old inside his home. As soon as the police arrived to catch Woo, they discovered that the body of the deceased had been thoroughly dismembered into about 400 parts. As a result of the results that revealed that the police had not responded swiftly to the victim's phone request for assistance and that it had taken them half a day to eventually reach WU's house, there was a public outcry against the police. Woo was initially sentenced to death by a district court in South Korea after a trial. The judge believed that Woo had dismembered the body in order to sell the parts of the body. Later on, however, an appeals court reversed that ruling and commutated his sentence to life in prison. Because of this ruling, which was supported by the Supreme Court of South Korea, a number of demonstrations took place around the country, all of which demanded that the death sentence be implemented. Since 1997, South Korea has not carried out any executions of the capital sentence, despite the fact that it is legally lawful. Number 9. The case of the murder of Soumya. In this event, which took place on February 1, 2011, an Indian beggar with one hand named Govindachami, who is also a repeat criminal, assaulted and raped a woman named Soumya, who was 23 years old. In the middle of the night, when they were traveling together on a train, Govindachami made an effort to rob his fellow traveler in a cabin that was empty. In response to Soumya's resistance, Govindachami banged her head against a wall and hurled her out of the train. It was him who leaped out of the vehicle after her and made his way back to the spot where her half-dead body was lying unmoving next to the railroad tracks. In the following step, he sexually attacked her while she was being pulled to a forested area close to the train. While receiving treatment in the hospital, Soumya ultimately passed away as a result of her wounds. Following the events that transpired, the authorities took Govindachami into custody and transferred his case to a specialized court. The court subsequently judged him guilty of the terrible act and handed him a sentence of death. After he attempted to appeal the verdict, a higher court ultimately upheld it, noting that his actions were repulsive to the collective conscience of society. Number 8. Murder of Hsiao-yen. When Hsiao-yen was murdered, Taiwan was rocked by a particularly riveting story of violence. This story occurred during the historic situation. On April 14, 1997, a group of individuals led by Chen Chin-hsing, Lin Chun-sheng, and Cao Tianmin abducted Pai Ping-ping, a student who was 17 years old and the only child from a local celebrity. Pai Ping-ping was walking to school at the time of her abduction. After that, they made an effort to kidnap her by demanding a staggering $5 million as a ransom. Because of the enormous media publicity, they made multiple changes to the location where they were supposed to meet, but they never showed up. As a gruesome kind of comfort that the victim was still alive, they even sent Pai a picture of the half-naked child tied up, and a severed finger that had been severed from her daughter's finger. The authorities who discovered the girl's mangled body in a drainage ditch during the latter week of April indicated that she may have already been dead during the ongoing ransom discussions. This would turn out to be a deception, however, as the officials reported that they discovered the body. As a consequence of this, the general population staged a major demonstration against the government and the police for their failure to effectively rescue the victim. In addition, they lambasted the media, stating that the inappropriately aggressive coverage they provided was a contributing factor in the death of the girl. Eventually, throughout the course of a nationwide manhunt, 2 of the ringleaders took their own lives before they could be apprehended. The 3rd individual, Chen, was captured and put to death in the year 1999. Number 7. Young Xinhai's murder spree. Despite the fact that young Xinhai's reign of terror lasted for only 3 years, he made up for the short amount of time by killing an absurdly high number of victims. This ensured that he would be remembered as one of the most prolific serial killers in China. The habitual offender and vagrant began his murdering rampage in the year 2000, following his release from a labor camp for rape charges that he had previously served. Rural residents, including farmers and villagers, were typically the ones who fell victim to his crimes. Using hammers, shovels, or axes, he would enter his target's home at night and kill his victims, and occasionally their family, after he had first staked out the location of his target's residence. The method that Yang used to carry out his operations was repeated across 4 provinces, which led to the deaths of more than 60 individuals. The authorities were finally able to apprehend him in 2003, which brought an end to his gruesome career. On February 14, 2004, Yang was put to death after being found guilty of the crimes brought against him by a court. Despite the fact that Yang's exact motivations were never discovered, it was suggested that he may have lost his temper when his girlfriend broke up with him. On the other hand, it's possible that he was nothing more than a mad psychopath who took pleasure in murdering others. Number 6. The murder of Atlantuya Shaariibuu. On the heels of the exceptionally gruesome murder of Mongolian national and translator Atlantuya Shaariibuu in 2006, Malaysia was rocked with one of the most notorious political scandals in the history of the country. Years prior to her sad death, she became the mistress of Abdul Razak Baginda, a key assistant to Prime Minister Najib Razak. Her murder came as a complete horror. According to the tale, Shaariibuu assisted Baginda in the year 2002 in the process of brokering a dubious deal that entailed the acquisition of 2 French submarines with a total value of $2 billion. After Baginda and Shaariibuu had broken up at some point, Shaariibuu went to his house in Kuala Lumpur in 2006 to claim her portion of the money, but Baginda's wife informed her that she was not entitled to it. Following a period of several days during which his ex-mistress harassed him, Baginda dispatched 2 bodyguards from the Prime Minister's team to deal with her aggressive behavior. Shaariibuu was found dead after being shot by the 2 men, who then proceeded to blow up her body with C4. In what some people have referred to as a national embarrassment, Baginda and his 2 bodyguards were all eventually found not guilty, despite the fact that the authorities attempted to arrest them. Number 5. The murder of Lucila Lalu. On May 30th, 1967, a garbage collector in Manila found a pair of legs that had been cleanly separated and chopped into 4 pieces. This discovery marked the beginning of one of the longest-running unresolved murder cases in the Philippines. The following day, investigators discovered a headless torso in a different part of the city. They determined that all of the body parts belonged to a lady called Lucila Lalu, who was 29 years old and owned a beauty shop and bar in the region. Due to the fact that the authorities were aware that Lalu had a few lovers on the side, they initially thought that Lalu's spouse was the one who committed the crime. On the other hand, Jose Santiano, a dental student who lived above Lalu's beauty business and confessed to killing her, made the confession after Lalu made an attempt to attract him. Later on, Santiano withdrew his confession and alleged that he had been coerced by the actual murderers into playing the role of the fall guy. This was yet another weird turn of events. In spite of the fact that Santiano was found guilty by a lower court, he was ultimately exonerated by the Court of Appeals after the judges had identified a number of inconsistencies in his confession. In addition, they were of the opinion that the dentistry student did not have the appropriate skills to do the surgical dismemberment that was performed on the deceased body of the accident victim. Number 4. The Geylang Bahru family murders. On the morning of January 6, 1979, an unknown assailant murdered all 4 children of the Tan family inside their flat in Geylang Bahru, Singapore. This is yet another crime that has not been solved, and it involves a murder that was exceptionally horrific. The murders occurred after both of the parents, who were operating a mini school bus, had left for their respective places of employment. When the parents got home, they saw the horrifying scene of their lifeless children's mangled bodies stacked on top of one another inside the toilet. They had already been skeptical of the situation due to the fact that the children were not answering their calls or responding to the knocks on their door that neighbor had made. On the other hand, the authorities who inspected the site did not uncover the weapon that was used in the murder, but they did notice that there was no evidence of breaking and entering. Additionally, they observed strands of hair on the hands of the oldest child, which indicated that he may have resisted the other children. Despite the fact that 2 ladies were taken into custody and questioned, they were eventually freed. It has been determined that the terrible murder has not been solved as of yet. Number 3. The Fandey murder. We may have been one of the rare instances in history that we genuinely had a reason to support a witch trial, and this episode may be one of those times. In July of 1993, a Malaysian witch doctor named Masna Ismail, her husband Maud Afandi Abdul Rahman, and their assistant brutally murdered a politician who had sought their assistance in order to advance his career. Before Ismail became a witch doctor and a consultant to a who's who of high-profile individuals, she was better known by her stage name, Mona Fandey, when she was at the height of her career as a singer and dancer. One of them would be Maslin Idris, a state assemblyman who would end up being her unfortunate victim. Following their successful attempt to get the politician to lie down and close his eyes for the purpose of performing a ceremony within their residence, the 3 individuals proceeded to mutilate his body by chopping it into 18 pieces and burying it in a hole in the neighborhood. Then, after taking his money, they went on a shopping spree in Kuala Lumpur and spent it all. They were found guilty of the murder and sentenced to death by a court 2 years after the crime was committed. In the end, the 3 were executed by hanging in November of 2001, and prior to their death, there were no indications of any regret whatsoever. Number 2. The Hello Kitty murder. These 3 Hong Kong thugs, Chan Manlok, Leung Shing Cho, and Leung Wai Lun, packed the skull of their victim inside a big Hello Kitty doll, making it look like something straight out of a macabre urban legend. Fan Man Yi, who was 23 years old at the time, was the victim. He had been kidnapped in March of 1999 due to a disagreement regarding money. Over the course of more than a month, the members of the gang subjected Fan to torturous treatment, including striking her with steel bars and pouring hot plastic on her limbs. After she passed away as a result of her injuries, the criminals disposed of her body by dismembering it and then boiling the parts together. In one occasion, they used the same chopsticks to stir both the noodles and her head while they were cooking on the burner that was adjacent to the one where they were boiling her head. After having nightmares about the horrible death, one of the gangster's girlfriends, who had also taken part in the torture, disclosed everything to the authorities. This was the only way that the gruesome murder was brought to light. After that, the suspects were taken into custody by the police, and a judge handed down a sentence of life imprisonment without the possibility of release for a period of 20 years. Number 1. The murder of Junko Furuta. The depravity that Junko Furuta, a student from Japan, found herself subjected to is something that no one should have to go through. The 17-year-old girl was kidnapped by 4 young hooligans on November 25, 1988, while she was heading home from school. They then held her captive in one of their residences. After the victim was forced to convince her parents that she was staying with her friends, she was then subjected to every conceivable type of torture for a period of 6 weeks. Using firecrackers and pliers, the lads mutilated her genitals in addition to the customary rape and beatings that they committed against her. And in addition to that, they forced her to eat bugs and drink her own pee. They burned her legs and tore her nails off when she made an attempt to flee from them. The parents of the child who owned the house were aware of everything that was going on, but they chose not to report it to the authorities because they were afraid of their son and the organization that he was associated with. Junko's situation got so intolerable that at one point she begged the boys to simply murder her. She was in such a state of distress. A couple of days later, she did, in fact, pass away. Following that, they placed her body inside of a drum that was filled with concrete and then left it in a large, empty lot. As juveniles, the lads were given comparatively low sentences, a mere slap on the wrist for such a horrible act, which is the most heartbreaking aspect of this entire narrative. And thank you for joining us on this journey through the sinister and the macabre. If you found these stories as chilling as we did, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe to Creepshow for more tales of terror. Remember to click the bell icon to get notified every time we unveil a new nightmare. Share your thoughts and which story haunted you the most in the comments below. Until next time, keep your doors locked and your nightmares closed.